Good evening and welcome to Surrendered Life. I'm Byron Brown, and again, I just want to thank you for tuning in. I always start with the same message. I am not a pastor. I'm not a biblical expert or a theologian. I'm just a disciple of God doing that part that we're all supposed to do by spreading the good news of Jesus Christ. Just want to share something with you that happened to me this week. Old friend of mine reached out to me, and I've been knowing this gentleman for 20 years or so. Haven't talked to him in a while, and I know at least been 5 years because it's been 5 years since I left the city that he lives in. And he just expressed to me how proud he was of what I was doing and how more of us, especially men, need to really express how good God has been to us and how our faith has carried us. In my response to him, I just told him, that he truly does not know what that means to me. Folks, I don't do this for subscribers. I don't do this for likes. I'm not trying to get paid by YouTube. Um, as you see, I come raw with it. I don't even have backgrounds and, subscripts and all those things. I just give it to you the way it comes to me. So, like I told him, in my response to him, and if he's listening, which I hope he is, I truly appreciate it. And I most definitely will stay connected with you in an intentional way. This week, I want to talk about faith. I know last week we talked about trusting God, but this week I want to talk about faith. Um, I really want to have a conversation about how genuine and active faith looks, um, how it persists when others try to silence it. It presses through barriers, and the faith that God can do what we need Him to do when we need Him to do it. Faith is one of the most powerful expressions of our relationship with God. It often requires us to trust Him in moments when we can't see the outcome or understand the process. There are many scriptures where we see how people connect their faith to God's power and how it also draws His attention in personal and transformative ways. Today, I want to look at some passages where I'll give two powerful examples of individuals who refuse to allow their circumstances or the opinions of others keep them from reaching Jesus. I hope these encounters remind us that faith is not passive. It's bold, it's intentional, and it's deeply personal. The first scripture I want to talk about today comes from Mark chapter 10, and we're going to look at 46 through 52. Um, and you probably heard about this story when you were a child. I'm going to talk about Bartimaeus, the blind beggar. The scripture reads, when they came to Jericho, as Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means sons of Timaeus, was sitting on the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stopped and said, call him. So they called the blind man. Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked him. The blind man said, Rabbi, I want to see. Go, said Jesus. Your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the roadside. The scriptures talk about a time when Jesus and his disciples were traveling through Jericho on their way to Jerusalem, where Jesus was, or I should say, the cross was awaiting Jesus. During those times, Jericho was a popular city built by Herod the Great, but it was a place where beggars were common in most towns, where they would wait along long roads near cities because that's where they could interact most with people. This is how they earned a living. These times, blindness was considered a curse from God for sin. But Jesus debunked this whole notion by healing the blind. Bartimaeus was the perfect example given in 1 Peter, first chapter, 8th verse, which read, "Though you have not seen him, you love him. Even though you do not see him now, you believe in and are filled with unexpressible glory and joy." Being blind, Bartimaeus had not seen Jesus' miracles, but he responded in faith to what he had heard about Jesus. With this faith, he earnestly cried out for Jesus' attention. Even when others tried to quiet him and calm him down, he cried even louder. But the beauty was in how Bartimaeus cried out. He addressed Jesus as Jesus, the son of David, and he asked him to have mercy on him. By calling Jesus the son of David, which was the title for Messiah, this means that Bartimaeus understood that Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah. To me, it's just interesting that a poor, blind beggar could see that Jesus was a Messiah or understand that Jesus was a Messiah, while the religious leaders of the time who physically got to see Jesus' miracles were blinded to his identity and refused to recognize him as the Messiah. Even though Bartimaeus needed, even though Bartimaeus' need was obvious to Jesus, he was blind and he needed sight. Jesus still asked him, "What do you want from me?" What Jesus wanted was for Bartimaeus to articulate what he needed and to glorify him. And we should be able to do the same. Bartimaeus responded, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "I want to see." Bartimaeus' response was humble and specific, earnest and sincere. Many people pray elaborate prayers that say many things, but really do not say anything. These type of prayers are uninterested and difficult for the ones offering them. Go, your faith has healed you. Bartimaeus' faith included a determination to reach Jesus because he cried out even when others tried to quiet him. And when they tried to make him be quiet, he cried out even more. He acknowledged Jesus was by referring to him as the son of David, which was the coming Messiah. He showed humility because he recognized Jesus as Rabbi and asked Jesus to have mercy on him. The confidence and ability to tell Jesus what he wanted. To me, the dopest part of this story is that after receiving his sight, Jesus told him to go his way, in which Bartimaeus immediately followed Jesus, making Jesus' way his way. And the second scripture that I want to talk about, it comes from Mark 5th chapter, verses 24 through 34. So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out of him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" You see the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you can ask, "Who touched me?" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And then the woman, knowing what she had done and what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear. She told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Just some background. In this scripture, Jesus was on his way to the home of Jairus, a local synagogue leader, who had pleaded with Jesus to lay hands on his daughter who was dying so that she could live. While walking to Jairus' home, a crowd began to gather around Jesus and his disciples and they began to follow them. Among them was a woman in the crowd who had suffered for bleeding for 12 years. This woman's condition was considered incurable, and the constant bleeding made her ceremonially unclean, which excluded her from most social contact. She had went to many doctors, excuse me, but her condition only became worse and she became poor. She desperately wanted Jesus to heal her, but she knew that her bleeding would cause Jesus to become unclean under Jewish law if she touched him. At this time, when all the crowd was around, it was literally impossible to get close to Jesus. But this woman desperately worked her way through the crowd in order just to touch him. She believed in the healing power of Jesus, and the border of his garment served as the point of contact of her faith. It is important to note that there was no magic in the garment of Jesus. According to the thinking of the time, when this unclean woman touched Jesus, it would have made him unclean. But because the nature of Jesus and the power of God, Jesus wasn't made unclean. She was actually made whole. When the woman touched his garment, she was immediately healed. And both the woman and Jesus knew what happened. She felt it in her body, and Jesus felt that power had gone out of him. "Who touched my clothes?" Jesus asked. Because this woman was embarrassed and thought her uncleanliness meant that no one would let her touch Jesus, she tried to do it secretly. But the good thing is that God often brings his work out in the open, even when it may start in secret. Just as in the story with Bartimaeus, where Jesus knew what Bartimaeus needed and wanted, he knew exactly who had touched him and who had received a healing. But he still asked, "Who touched my clothes?" He did this for the benefit of the woman, not because he didn't know who was the person that had touched him. You see, you have to understand there's a difference between those in the crowd who touched Jesus out of curiosity and the woman who touched him out of faith. Even today, many people are vaguely familiar with Jesus, but nothing in their life is changed or made better by this passing acquaintance. I can almost guess when the woman's miracle was received, many in the crowd thought, "I bumped into Jesus. I touched him, yet I was not healed." But it was her faith that released God's healing power. There is a huge difference between bumping into Jesus here and there and reaching out to him in faith. You can go to church week after week and quote unquote bump into Jesus. But this isn't the same as reaching out to touch him in faith. Jesus called her out so that she would absolutely know she was healed, so that others would know she was healed, and she would know why she was healed. Jesus wanted the woman to step forward and identify herself, because to let her slip away would have been a lost opportunity to teach her that his clothes didn't have any magical properties, but that her faith in him had healed her. There are many similarities between these stories, but what I think the main thing to emphasize is the level of faith that these two individuals in the stories had. Neither had met Jesus, but both had heard of him. And just from hearing about what he had did, believed he was the only one who could heal him. Both believed and acknowledged that he was Jesus, the coming Messiah. Both humbly sought him out, one crying out and the other reaching out. In both cases, Jesus knew who they were and what they needed, but he still called them out to acknowledge that it was faith that had healed them. Both were told to go, but began to follow Jesus as the way that they wanted to go. So as we close this out, think about your life. You probably are not physically blind or suffering from some incurable condition, but are you spiritually blind or suffering from a spiritual condition of the heart? Do you truly know and recognize Jesus, or have you just heard of him and just casually bump into him from time to time? Do you humbly cry out for him and fight to have a relationship with him based on your faith in him? Or do you just need to see more from him before you can truly believe? Just like the blind beggar and the woman with the issue of blood, you have to know that Jesus knows who you are and what you need. But are you able to tell him what you need, or to reach out to him truly knowing and believing that what you need only he can provide? Is your faith strong enough to release Jesus' healing power? Or do you just go through the motions, praying and going to church each and every week to say you did so? Like the blind beggar and the woman with the issue of blood, you have to know that having true faith is the only way to healing and salvation. Your faith has to be bold, courageous, and unwavering. So whether you need to continually cry out or must fight through the minutia, you must show Jesus that your faith is real. Sometimes spiritual clarity comes not from what we see, but from what we choose to believe. Being near Jesus isn't enough. Faith pushes us through the noise and reaches for him with desperation and purpose. And by doing so, your faith too can heal you. So once again, I thank you for joining me. And I hope these words mean something to someone and hit them the right way. If you can acknowledge who Jesus is, if you can cry out to him and let him know what you want, and truly believe that he will deliver because he is who he is, your faith can heal you too. Have a good evening. We'll see you next week.